is abnormal. And now Riley was standing only a meter away from Gary, with the beams already starting to flicker on his face as Gary's strength slowly began to reach its limit. You and Sylvie Saveliana are slowly becoming a dear friend to my sister, Gary, Riley then whispered as he looked at Gary straight in his glowing eyes. If you do this again, I will gouge out your eyes. Roger that, Gary weakly said as his heat vision flickered once more, before fading completely with a slight sizzle. Thanks for stopping. But before he could finish his words, he was suddenly blown away by a wall of earth. Riley blinked a couple of times as the voice that was just talking in front of him turned into air. He then turned his head towards Scarlet Mage, whose eye was currently twitching non-stop. Her hand was still currently pointed forward, making her the obvious culprit. You broke your own rule, Scarlet Mage. Riley then let out a sigh. Scarlet Mage then quickly rushed towards Gary to check up on him, but not before stopping in front of Riley and whispering something loudly in his ears. You should have at least warned me you were going to let go of the wall. I am so disappointed in you, Scarlet Mage. Riley clicked his tongue several times. Ugh, Scarlet Mage then threw her tablet towards Riley. Just call for a medic. And so, after the medics came and took Gary away, the class safely continued with their exercise. Riley is evil. Who knows what he might do if he felt like he was being isolated? Yes, surely, that was the only reason why Scarlet Mage helped him, right? As Scarlet Mage was busy with her thoughts, Riley slowly made his way towards his designated group, students that also had telekinetic abilities. And as soon as he joined them, the telekinetic students, who were previously chatting with each other, all quieted down. Riley, however, did not seem to mind as he just took his seat along with the others. Talk to him. No, you talk to him. I don't even know what we're going to do yet. Whispers traveled through Riley's ears as most of the group looked at each other, gesturing to who should approach Riley. But finally, after a few more seconds of this somewhat awkward situation, one of the female students in the group approached him. Your name is Riley, right? I'm Bella. The girl lightly flicked her shoulder-twirling brown hair before letting out a long and deep sigh. We were just discussing each other's powers, so I feel like it's fair you should join us instead of brooding in the side. What are you doing? One of the other girls in the group tried to pull Bella away, but she just nonchalantly waved her hand, saying it was all right. Are you guys retards? She then said. Why are you isolating people like it's the Godman 80s? Didn't you see what he did during the mock battle yesterday? I did, and so Bella lightly nudged her nose as she let out a small scoff. It's called a mock battle for a reason. Did you think they're just going to shake hands? That's no need to be too harsh, my sweet Belle. A slightly feminine male student, who looked awfully similar to Bella, suddenly danced his way towards Riley, waving his hand all over the place before sitting at the desk in front of him. They just do not appreciate beauty when they see one. You are the creepiest one here, Ben. Ah, such hurtful words. Why don't you soothe my heart, Riley? The two of you are twins. Riley did not seem to mind Ben's somewhat coquettish behavior as he took a slight glance at the two. How I wish we weren't. Bella rolled her eyes as she slowly returned to where she was previously sitting, spinning her chair and sitting on it backwards with her legs wide open. But yes, sadly so. How curious. Riley muttered. The two of you seemed to have swapped sexual preferences. See, I like you already. You're very perceptive and blunt. Bella let out a chuckle as the group of girls that she was previously chatting with all moved away from her, unlike these fake young'uns. Why are you talking like an old man? Quit being so disgraceful. Ben shook his head as he leaned closer towards Riley. What do you say we leave all of these normies and go through a perilous journey on our own? I am afraid you can't really go out of the academy. Riley shook his head. It's against the rules. Fatty! Bella suddenly burst out in laughter as soon as she heard Riley's words, although there wasn't anything remotely funny with what he said. Seeing this, the other members of the group could not help but look at each other. It would seem they have their hands full. They thought that the only weird member of their group would be Riley, but it turns out they have the whole package with the twins. So, I suppose we should start introducing ourselves again now that we're complete. Bella then once again stood up as she looked at Riley. I'll start. My name is Bella Jackson. I have the power to move all sorts of metal with my mind, so I guess that counts as telekinesis, and that's why I am in this group. And I am Benjamin Jackson, but all of you may call me Benjoya. No one is going to call you that. Shut up, it's my turn, Ben hissed at his sister before once again quickly composing himself. And like my sister, I could also control metal, but with more grace and control, like the fleeting wind in a warm summer. Ben then elegantly waved his hand, causing almost 100 tiny steel balls to fly out from his pockets, and with every flick of Ben's fingers, the metal balls arranged themselves into all sorts of shapes, a bird, a tree, and even the face of a human. Our father also has the same power, so shut your mouth, you idiot. Before Ben could finish his words, a metal plate suddenly covered his entire head. We are not supposed to reveal anything about our family's background. Ben seemed to be saying something, but only muffles and noise whispered through the air as Bella seemed to have no plan in taking the metal plate off. There was a slight ringing as Ben tried to control it, but it would seem his sister's raw power was greater than his, as the only thing he could do was budge it a centimeter. This is probably the best time for the others to introduce themselves, Bella then said as she looked at Riley. Go ahead, Riley. Chapter 21 Twins Know. If Scarlet Mage could slap herself at this moment, she probably would have to feel sorry for the most heinous and evilest supervillain in the world. The young man who literally has her and her mother hostage. Was this some sort of Stockholm Syndrome? Or perhaps Riley had some sort of power to bewitch people. Was that it? Was Riley actually bewitching her right now? It made sense that he would have that kind of power. It was an evil power, after all. If that was truly the case, then Scarlet Mage would try her hardest to resist it. It might be hard, since she was planning to have them both kicked out from the academy by pretending to have a romantic relationship with him. But since Riley is still indeed just a minor, there was no way that she would actually fall in love with him, even if he has the spell to do so. Right. Scarlet Mage looked at Riley one last time before shaking her head. She might be working for him now, but it wasn't her responsibility to hold her hand every single time. If Riley was destined to be alone, then so be it. She knew she was starting to sound contradictory, but she truly can't do anything at this point. Riley Ross, please go to your group. But alas, after only a minute, Scarlet Mage pointed towards a group of students that were on the most left corner of the classroom. Interesting friends. Bella, who also noticed this, could not help but comment. They're not my friends, Riley quickly replied as he shook his head. Really? Bella's eyebrows rose as she looked back and forth between Riley and the two. You chat with each other, joke with each other, and spend time together. That makes you friends. Is that what friendship is? Riley muttered. I have only known them for a day. I believe friendships are built with time. Oh, my dear Riley, that is where you are wrong. Ben gracefully freed himself from his sister's grip as he once again danced while following behind Scarlet Mage. Friendships bloom even in the most unexpected places, even at the most unexpected times. Time is but a decoration. What does that even mean? Bella let out a long and deep sigh as she heard her brother's words. Don't mind him. He wants to be a writer, so his mind is a bit off. I see. Riley nodded. And you, what do you want to be? Me. Bella was slightly surprised with the sudden question. I don't really know. A superhero, I guess. It's really the only thing I could think of. I see. What about you? An astronaut. What are you? A child? No, I'm 16 years old. Never mind. Bella did not really ask any further, as they just continued to quietly follow Scarlet Mage across the gigantic hallways of the academy. Most of them thought that they were going to the training hall where they had their mock battles yesterday, but instead they were taken outside and into a wide-open field. Once again, the students could not help but think of how big the entire area of the academy was. There were also other students from the other classes, but unlike with the training hall, the other classes were too far away to even hear each other. All right, gather up. Scarlet Mage then clapped her hands as she asked her class to gather in front of her. Our activity for today is simple. I want all of you to try and overpower the rest of the members of your group. while also trying to learn from each other's abilities if you can. Overpower. Another contest of who is stronger. But Sylvie is in our group. This should be fun. Setting up hierarchies. Quiet down. Scarlet Mage once again clapped her hands. I want all of you to set up and find places for your group before I explain further, and we could proceed with the activity. But first, I need someone to officiate and watch the skirmish with me, so, Mr. Riley, sit this one out. Chapter 22. Neutralize. Mr. Riley, sit this one out. See, even the instructor thinks he is dangerous. The voices of the students whispered through the vast field as they all turned to look towards Riley. Although most of them did not think much of it, the ones in Riley's group, however, were all breathing sighs of relief. Although they don't know how strong Riley truly is, they knew he didn't know how to hold back. Since their current activity had something to do with overpowering each other, Riley was a very dangerous element in their group. And so, with Scarlet Mage calling him away, most of them rejoiced. Too bad. I wanted to see how strong you are. Bella let out a small breath as she shook her head. There's always next time, I guess. Watch us dance, Riley dear, Ben added. I suppose. Riley nodded before making his way towards Scarlet Mage, and as he did so, he once again felt an ominous aura piercing through him. He quickly looked towards the direction where it was coming from, only to once again see Gary moving his hands in a very obscene way, his smile almost reaching his ears. However, this time, a slight sizzle started to smoke from his hands, causing him to instantly stop. Scarlet Mage could let it pass once, but doing it a second time, she wouldn't just let him off without a warning. You sure do have a weird taste in friends. As expected, Scarlet Mage said as Riley stood beside her. They are not my friends. And why did you call for me? Scarlet Mage, I just needed someone to assist me in overseeing the activity. That was a lie, of course. Riley was dangerous, and she would be damned if she allowed him to hurt any of her students. Although she felt a little uncomfortable seeing Riley isolated for some reason, it has to be done. She was the only one in the entire academy that knew of his true identity, and as a superhero, her first priority was to keep all of the children safe. I see, Riley nodded. I thought you were thinking that I would hurt them. But you have my word. I will not kill anyone since I am currently in retirement. Scarlet Mage. Hearing Riley's whispers, Scarlet Mage's eyes started to twitch. Not kill anyone. He almost spooned out someone's heart during the entrance examination. He almost gouged out someone's eye during the mock battle yesterday. Not to mention he threatened to torture her mother if Scarlet Mage ever reveals his identity. But then again, he really hasn't killed anyone yet. Scarlet Mage quickly shook her head. Why was she trying to give Riley an excuse herself? Was she right? Did he really have the power to entrance and bewitch someone? Let's not talk about this here, Scarlet Mage then quickly said as she once again shook her head. We're student and teacher, so let's pretend to be one. She then stuttered as she let out a slightly awkward but alluring smile towards him. Yes, this was the start of her plan. Besides preventing Riley from hurting the other students, she would also make sure that they would be seen as some sort of a couple. It was hitting two birds with one stone. If the students began to suspect they have some kind of romantic relationship, then the academy would have no choice but to kick out the both of them, limiting Riley's hostages. Okay. Riley, on the other hand, seemed to be completely oblivious to her advances. So what did you want me to do? Scarlet Mage, all right. Scarlet Mage then cleared her throat as she faced the other students. The activity for today is more than just a contest of strength. It's also a chance to learn more about your powers from others that have the same power. But with that said, it's still a competition, and as such, those who come out on top of each of the groups will be given 1,000 mega points to spend around the academy. Scarlet Mage's words completely woke the students up. 1,000 mega points. How many lunches could they buy from that? Some of them also saw that the academy was also selling all sorts of things, even vehicles. Most of them were minors and weren't allowed to drive outside, but since motorcycles and cars were being sold here, doesn't that mean they could use them? And so, with those thoughts lingering in the air, the fires in the students' eyes were almost enough to burn the field of grass they were in. There was one student, however, whose eyes were slightly confused. Ms. Scarlet Mage. While the other students were busy thinking of the things they could buy, Sylvie Saveliana stepped forward. What about me? What do I get if I come out on top? Sylvie had unlimited pain. 1,000 mega points meant nothing to her. Nothing, Scarlet Mage quickly said. But you have everything to lose. What? Sylvie could not help but blink a couple of times after hearing Scarlet Mage's words. Your group is in luck. Since you are currently the Mega Student of the Academy, they will have a chance to take that title from you, Mega Student. Is that what the top student is called? She has unlimited pain. How is that even fair? Who is thinking of these names? Those who were still not aware of Sylvie's status could not help but look at each other in shock. Unlimited pain. So she was allowed to buy everything the Academy had to offer if she wanted to. What kind of privilege is that? And why is she not using it? While the other students were still in shock, Sylvie's group, on the other hand, all had weird smiles on their faces. To think they would actually have the chance to become the Mega Student, and all they had to do was defeat Sylvie. Perhaps they could just gang up on her. All right, I will explain the rules. Scarlet Mage then clapped her hands as she gestured to the students to calm down. You can't hurt your opponent. Wait. What? Teach? How are we going to compete against each other if we are not allowed to? As superheroes, we are seen as a beacon of hope. As much as possible, we only neutralize our enemy. And one way to do that is to completely overpower them, Scarlet Mage explained before the complaints of the students could get worse. Of course, hurting our enemy is unavoidable and is more often than not necessary. But sadly, that's the rule. As to how you can beat your opponent without harming them, well, that is what you will learn today. Be creative. As for the second rule, on-and-off matches only. It is up to your group to decide what the lineup is going to be. And that's it. You can proceed. But please do know that if my partner and I see that you have broken the rules, you will instantly lose the right to compete. And with that, Scarlet Mage floated into the air, her eyes carefully watching the students front as it. So, we should just start. What kind of mechanics is this? My power is electrocution. How am I not going to hurt anyone with this? Tickle someone into submission. That's actually a very good idea, is it? The whispers of confusion littered the air as all of the students looked at each other for answers. If anything, their activity for today was somewhat philosophical in nature, to make someone submit without hurting them. What sort of Zen bullshit was that? Most of them thought, this is why you normies won't succeed in life. With the mock battle yesterday, as well as the sanctioned duels around the academy, you all should have known what this school is all about. Bella, however, cracked her knuckles as she proceeded to step away from her group. Come, brother, let's show these fools how to do it. Me then blinked his eyes a couple of times before following his sister. I actually also have no idea what to do, but all right. A battle between siblings, Ben and Bella, how dramatic. And here I thought we were on the same wavelength. Watch me. And as soon as Bella said that, the ground beneath them began to tremble. Bella began to scream, garnering the attention of the whole class. Bella's veins began to pop out from her black skin as her face started to become pale, obviously straining her muscles as she continued to roar. The others were slightly confused as to what she was doing, but as the tremble in the ground slowly turned into a quake, their eyes could not help but widen. Is she trying to lift something beneath the ground? One of the members of her group shouted. No fucking way, but she could only bend metal, right? What is she trying to lift? A water pipe or something? Bella's scream became louder and louder. But alas, before the others could find out what she was truly doing, her screams abruptly stopped and her body dropped to the ground like a rag doll. Did she just faint? Bella then quickly rushed towards to hug her sister, checking if she was still breathing. And considering her slightly ample breasts were beating heavily, she was. I will avenge you, my dear sister, in my dear life. I will avenge you. Well, at least I got an idea as to what I will do now, one of the members of the telekinesis group muttered as he stepped forward, ignoring Ben's wails as he challenged one of the other members. It wasn't only him. The other students who watched Bella's display finally also had an idea as to what to do. One of the ways they could win without hurting someone was to show the difference in strength, to showcase what they could do, to scream to your opponent's face that you are superior. Bella tried to do it, but alas, she overestimated herself. And so, soon, the students in each group began challenging each other. Scarlet Mage, who saw this, could not help but let out a long and deep sigh. In truth, even she was slightly confused with this activity. She was only following the syllabus given to her, and she would lie if she said she herself wouldn't have trouble in this curriculum. That student called Bella is strong. Right, wait, what are you doing here? Scarlet Mage almost fell to the ground as Riley was suddenly floating in the air beside her. You said I should watch them, and that is what I am doing. Scarlet Mage, I see. Scarlet Mage quickly composed herself as she turned her attention back to her class. It would seem that some of them are starting to battle it out, but most were still confused as to what to do. But after a few seconds of silence, the feeling of Dark Day quietly floating beside her made her nerves slightly rise in levels. If you were still participating in the activity, what would you do? And so, after a few more moments of deliberation, Scarlet Mage asked the question she was most curious about. This was a rare chance to get insight into the mind of a supervillain, especially from someone as ruthless as Riley. Am I allowed to hurt their families? No, surprisingly, Scarlet Mage felt Riley's heart fluctuate a little as soon as she uttered the question. She could even see Riley slightly uncomfortable, as if he was truly deliberating his answer. And finally, after a few more seconds, Riley answered, I'll cut off their nerve endings, making their feeling of pain. No, you're not allowed to harm them, remember. But if they don't, forget it. Scarlet Mage shook her head in disappointment. What answer was she expecting? And here she was thinking that Riley would actually take her question seriously. Or maybe he was, and he truly can't think of anything but to hurt people. He is Dark Day, after all. I will destroy this place. I will destroy this place without hurting anyone, Riley repeated. I am sure that would be enough to neutralize them. I see. Scarlet Mage nodded as she let out a short but deep sigh before letting out a small smile. It would seem Riley was capable of not hurting anyone after all. But by the gods, it was a good thing he pulled Riley away from the activity. Chapter 23 Potential Villain List 1. The students of Class 1A continued with their activity, and with the thundering noises that were echoing through the air, it would seem that the other classes had begun their exercise as well. Interesting. It had not even been a quarter of an hour since the activity had started, but it would seem that one of the groups in Scarlet Mage's class has already reached their conclusion. Scarlet Mage slowly floated towards the group, who only had one remaining student standing still. Riley also followed Scarlet Mage, his eyes looking at the 4 students that were completely unconscious on the ground. This is the telepath group. Yes, Scarlet Mage then approached the only student left standing. Why, yes, the young man said, the tone of his voice filled with laziness and a little lag. Can you tell me your name and state how you are the only one left standing in your group? Name, Cedric. The young man mumbled, illusion. They are dreaming right now. I see. Scarlet Mage quickly nodded as soon as Cedric finished explaining, which took almost 15 seconds. She then asked Cedric to retrieve his ID card, before quickly grabbing it and tapping it on the tablet she was holding. Here you go. I added 1,000 PAM to your account, Scarlet Mage said as she placed the card back in Cedric's pocket herself. Just wait on the side for now while we wait for the others to finish up. Okay, Cedric lazily said as he slowly walked towards a nearby tree for shade. Cedric Atkinson, if Scarlet Mage wasn't mistaken, he was in the potential villain list along with many other students. And seeing as he was able to overpower the rest of the members of his group, she had to add priority to his name. The potential villain list, as the name suggests, was a list of students that were deemed to have the most potential to go to the dark side if left unchecked. Scarlet Mage has screened almost 1,000 students in the span of weeks, and she didn't want to admit it, but almost 20 of the students belonged to the list, and there were probably more who were just good at hiding their alignment. As someone on the list, They were given more attention than the other students to intervene and hopefully change them before they were sent to the outside world. If they were sent outside, Scarlet Mage had no idea what the Academy was planning for the students who are still on the list by the time they graduate, but she was hoping it wouldn't lead to something drastic. There were 5 more in the potential villain list in her class, excluding Riley. She was having second thoughts about putting him there now, as her plan to pretend to be a couple was her #1 priority so that he would be kicked out of the Academy. If he was put on the potential villain list, then he might be transferred to another class since there were already too many in her class. Interesting. Cedric can create illusions. Scarlet Mage. Shouldn't you know by now that powers aren't created equal? Scarlet Mage raised her voice, making sure that the other students could also hear her. Along with our activity on the first day, this activity is also trying to show you that even though you may have people with the same powers as you, that doesn't mean you aren't unique. There are certain ways to master your powers. You may lack raw power, but in return, your control would be better. Although the students were busy with their matches, those who were watching could not help but nod their heads. They already saw how one of the students of the telekinetic group fainted due to overusing her power. She had raw power, but she certainly lacked control. I wasn't aware they could do that. Riley once again whispered close to Scarlet Mage's ears. I usually kill them first since they used to be able to rid my mind. You used to? Scarlet Mage was trying her best to ignore Riley's warm breath crawling down her neck. She did say she was going to pretend with Riley, so she should get used to this kind of intimacy. What do you mean used to? Telepaths could no longer read my mind. Scarlet Mage, he replied. That is why I wanted to kill you in the first place, since the way you read people is different from the rest. I see. Scarlet Mage didn't know whether to be proud or scared of the fact that Darkday saw him as a sort of a threat. No, it was definitely both a blessing and a curse. There was a reason that she was the only one that knows Riley's identity, and she would make sure to fulfill it. And so, once they were kicked out from the school, her responsibility will finally start. She was now calling this Operation Turn Dark into Light. I should probably incapacitate Cedric for life. Riley then once again let out a whisper, don't. The exercise continued, with most still not being able to reach a conclusion. But surprisingly, Sylvie's group now only had her and Gary left standing. It would seem they were having a contest of strength through arm wrestling. Perhaps this was also the reason why most of the groups still hadn't finished their matches, since all of them were engrossed with Sylvie's match. Scarlet Mage told them to focus on their own matches, but they immediately went back to watching Sylvie and Gary. And so, with a sigh, Scarlet Mage could only do the same. Even more than the potential villain list, the mega student is their #1 priority. Of course, for Scarlet Mage, Sylvie was only second to Riley. I guess it's you and me then, mega student. Fatey, please don't. Sylvie could not help but groan in frustration as she saw Gary trying his best not to laugh, but knowing him, he was probably just doing it deliberately to annoy her. But it wasn't entirely his fault, though. Who in their right mind even decided to call the top student that way? This is what happens when you give old people the power to name things. Let's do this, old friend. We've only known each other for a day. Sylvie rolled her eyes as she walked towards the large stone they were having their arm wrestling match on, and considering all the dents and cracks on it, their group has used it well. What about the entrance exam day? Gary let out a slight gasp as he placed his elbow on the boulder. I thought we've made a solid connection there. My heart bleeds at this betrayal. I thought you were my friend. I am. Sylvie blinked a couple of times as she grabbed Gary's hand. Then no hard feelings after I am done with you. Ho, is that the confidence you got from being the mega student? Sylvie's. I could not help but twitch from Gary's words. But after a few seconds, she let out a long and deep breath. She shouldn't let herself get distracted and be dragged into Gary's words. After all, that was one of the reasons he won his matches. Let's just start in 3. All right. 1, 2, 3. A thunderous noise exploded in the air as the grass waved in a ripple. The students who were near the two also could not help but slightly back away from all the debris and dirt that was being thrown around as the boulder the two were leaning on dug through the ground. Shit, you're not going to let me win, Gary chuckled nervously. Let me win. I'll return the title to you next week. I just really want to buy that bike. No, then just buy me one. No, alone, Gary muttered as their arms both began to tremble, with the boulder they were leaning on digging through the ground even further, causing them to slouch. Sylvie wasn't going to lie, but she did not expect Gary to be stronger than the rest of the members of her group, but at the same time, she also could not help but be happy. Throughout her life, she was surrounded by nothing but walls as well as people that were too fragile that they might possibly break from her touch. But now, being surrounded by friends that are somewhat at the same level as her, she felt safe. Hannah was undoubtedly strong as she already experienced fighting with her firsthand, and she would only grow stronger. Gary had similar abilities to her, so they would surely have a lot to talk about in the future. As for Riley, he had this mysterious air around him, but with all the things he had been showing so far, she knew he was the same as her, always holding back. And as soon as she thought of that, their hands, which had been remaining equal for a full minute, now started to move, with Sylvie pushing Gary's hand downwards. Gary's teeth started to show as the veins on his neck started to pop out, his grip growing stronger as he tried his best to fight back. Sylvie slightly lightened her grip so as to prevent hurting him. She really had to admit it. Gary was strong, but sadly it wasn't enough. Please stop this, you're only going to end up hurting yourself. Chapter 24 Potential Villain List to Please stop this. You're only going to end up hurting yourself. Sylvie made sure to lighten her grip, allowing Gary to realize that she was only holding back so as to not hurt him. Gary, however, took this chance to push her hand away, but alas, the difference between their strength was starting to show as Sylvie quickly held her ground. You really want to win this badly? Sylvie furrowed her eyebrows. I guess, Gary once again chuckled, before gritting his teeth to the point that it was starting to bleed. Stop, Gary, you're not going to win. I won't. Another thunder reverberated in the air as the boulder they were leaning on slowly began to crack. And due to Gary's sudden rise in power, the back of Sylvie's palm almost touched the surface of the boulder. If it wasn't for her also increasing her strength at the last second, then she would have probably already lost. Seeing this, she realized that she was probably overestimating her strength, and should probably already end this if she didn't want to lose. I'm sorry, Gary, Sylvie then whispered, but you still lack the training. A sort of ringing vibrated in the air as Gary's hand started to be pushed back, with the tremble of the boulder matching his struggling arm. Stop struggling. I said no. Sylvie could not help but squint as Gary's eyes started to emit a bright red light. What are you doing? Sylvie yelled as her eyes also emitted a red light. Did you really want to win this badly? Sadly so. Gary once again chuckled as he turned his blazing eyes towards Sylvie. You are strong. I am sure this is only going to tickle. Are you crazy? Sylvie screamed. Miss Scarlet Mage. That's enough. Scarlet Mage quickly rushed towards the two to stop them as soon as Sylvie's voice reached her ears. She was just going to watch at first to see how the situation was going to unfold because Gary didn't seem to be that aggressive, but perhaps she should have stopped it earlier, knowing what she knows. Gary Gray, one of the 6 in the class that belonged to the potential villain list. Never, even though Scarlet Mage was already on her way towards them, Gary didn't seem to have any intentions of stopping as his eyes grew even brighter and started to emit a trail of smoke. Don't. Sylvie was also ready to release her heat vision, but when she saw the crazed look in Gary's face, the only thing she could do was close her eyes and look to the side, gritting her teeth for the pain to come. Stop. The strands of Scarlet Mage's hair stood up as she raised her hand. The grass beneath her feet started to dance as a clump of air seemed to have gathered on the palm of her hand, and without even a moment, the clump of wine shot towards Gary. But halfway through it, Gary let out a shout as the light in his eyes started to become a beam, its path straight towards Sylvie's face. Oh, fuck! Gary moved his head to the side, as if trying his hardest to avoid hitting Sylvie with his heat vision, but by doing so, the beam his eyes were emitting lost control, shooting towards the other students that were near them. I can't stop it. Scarlet Mage increased the output of her power to push Gary away, but to her surprise, instead of shooting faster, the ball of wind that she summoned completely dispersed. She did not let herself panic, however, as a wall of earth quickly emerged in front of her. She was about to trap Gary inside of it, but once again, she felt a strong resistance that wasn't allowing her to control the wall. This time, she allowed herself to panic as she quickly looked towards Gary, but to her surprise, no one was screaming. Instead, everyone was completely silent as they all watched as Gary's heat vision seemed to have stopped midway, as if some type of glass was blocking it from moving. "You're not allowed to hurt anyone, Gary. The same goes for you, Scarlet Mage." That's Scarlet Mage then turned her eyes towards the somewhat cold voice whispering in the field, only to see Riley slowly descending from the air, landing right in front of the end of Gary's heat vision. I lost control of it. I didn't mean to." Gary then started to panic, his heat vision not showing any signs of stopping. "I was only going to scare Sylvie." "I see," Riley then said as he stepped forward. The loud gasps of the students quickly filled the air as soon as they saw this. Some of them closed their eyes, not wanting to see Riley get burnt by the beam. However, contrary to their expectations, the beam started to shorten. It was as if it was trying to avoid Riley, becoming shorter with each of his steps. What? Scarlet Mage could not help but take in a gulp as she saw this. Her wind magic dispersed, the resistance she felt with the wall of earth that she summoned. And now Gary's beam just stopping short of hitting Riley in the face. Was this all Riley's doing? It might have seemed like a minute, but everything happened almost in just a moment. Riley stopped everything almost simultaneously. Forget about his raw power. Even his control was out of this world. Once again, Scarlet Mage was reminded of a simple fact. Dark Day was able to beat Mega Woman. His power is abnormal. And now Riley was standing only a meter away from Gary, with the beams already starting to flicker on his face as Gary's strength slowly began to reach its limit. "You and Sylvie Saveliana are slowly becoming a dear friend to my sister, Gary," Riley then whispered as he looked at Gary straight in his glowing eyes. "If you do this again, I will gouge out your eyes." Roger that," Gary weakly said as his heat vision flickered once more, before fading completely with a slight sizzle. "Thanks for stopping." But before he could finish his words, he was suddenly blown away by a wall of earth. Riley blinked a couple of times as the voice that was just talking in front of him turned into air. He then turned his head towards Scarlet Mage, whose eye was currently twitching nonstop. Her hand was still currently pointed forward, making her the obvious culprit. "You broke your own rule, Scarlet Mage." Riley then let out a sigh. Scarlet Mage then quickly rushed towards Gary to check up on him, but not before stopping in front of Riley and whispering something loudly in his ears. "You should have at least warned me you were going to let go of the wall. I am so disappointed in you, Scarlet Mage." Riley clicked his tongue several times. "Ugh." Scarlet Mage then threw her tablet towards Riley. "Just call for a medic." And so, after the medics came and took Gary away, the class safely continued with their exercise. Perhaps because of what happened, it would seem they became a lot more careful so as to not repeat something similar from happening. They were supposed to be having their first class with another teacher after this, but after what happened, Scarlet Mage decided to let everyone go back to their dorms to rest instead, of course everyone except Riley. As soon as the other students saw this, they all started whispering to each other. Some of them have heard that Scarlet Mage personally dropped Riley off at the dorms, and now this blatant favoritism and inappropriate whispering to one another did. They actually have a thing. Scarlet Mage, who saw the students looking at her and Riley while they exchanged their whispers, could not help but nod in satisfaction. Spreading the rumors is only the prologue of her plan. If she wanted the academy to have a reason to kick them out, then she should commit to her role. "Was there something else you needed from me, Scarlet Mage?" "Yes, I have information about Mega Woman." Scarlet Mage slightly stuttered as she tried to look Riley in the eyes. Already, Riley furrowed his eyebrows. "What is it?" "It is sensitive information." Scarlet Mage took in a gulp. "So, let's talk about this in my apartment." The first part of Operation Turn Dark into Light officially starts now. Chapter 25. Confusing Emotions. Just make yourself at home. Okay, I am just going to take a shower. What for? I just need to clear my head so I can give you the information about Mega Woman clearer. I see, then you may do so. Scarlet Mage, you are right. The muffled sounds of the shower whispered into the air as Riley was left alone in Scarlet Mage's living room. The only thing that Riley could do while waiting for Scarlet Mage was look out the window wall, which surprisingly had a somewhat amazing view. The apartment provided for the teachers of Mega Academy was beside a man-made lake, and since Scarlet Mage's apartment was located on the 8th floor, you could even see the school building from there, but still not outside the walls that surrounded the whole academy, a testament to how tall it truly was. Riley had already thought that the rooms provided for the students were already quite luxurious and spacious, but seeing the teachers' apartments, his room suddenly felt subpar. Just how much budget did the world government actually allot for the Mega Academies? And considering there were more in other countries, they truly have been preparing for this for a while now. They even have a colossal dome, which replicated the sky, protecting them from being seen by the outside world from above. That alone would have been costly, not to mention the technology needed to create and maintain everything. The technology here was almost alien. Mega Woman came from another planet. Perhaps it has some sort of correlation. Maybe she even provided and shared the technology, but Mega Woman was against something like the Academy being built. So what exactly was going on here? What are you thinking about? That was quick. Scarlet Mage. Riley then quickly turned around as he heard Scarlet Mage's voice. Did you make sure to wash everything? I did. Scarlet Mage could not help but groan in frustration as soon as she heard Riley's words. She was wearing a robe that almost exposed most of her skin, and that was his only reaction. Shouldn't guys his age be panicking right now as his hormones turn crazy? Even if he had a form of autism, it shouldn't mean Riley wasn't able to feel his prepubescent urges, right? Scarlet Mage could only furrow her eyebrows from the dangerous thoughts in her mind. If this were any other case, then she would definitely lock herself up in jail for having thoughts like this towards a minor. But this was Dark Day, so there should be an exception, and besides, she was doing this for a good cause, and perhaps the only cause that matters right now. She even made sure that the curtains to her apartment were fully open, and the cameras in the entrance of the apartment were able to see her and Riley enter, and hopefully someone reports them to the hierarchist so both of them would be kicked out. This is, after all, the first part of Operation Turn Dark into Light. And please call me by my real name when we are alone. Scarlet Mage then said as she sat on the sofa, crossing her legs as she started drying her black hair, which was previously red. You could also change the color of your hair. That is a very weird power. Scarlet Mage. No, it's a wig and a part of my costume. Scarlet Mage let out a small giggle. And please call me by my real name while we are alone. It's weird being called Scarlet Mage without wearing the mask. If you are more comfortable with that, Catherine are right. Hearing her name being called by Riley, she could not help but look to the side as she felt her face slightly warming up. Anyway, what were you thinking about earlier? I was thinking about Mega Woman. I see. Catherine held her breath upon hearing Mega Woman's name coming up. She told Riley that she had information about her so that he would follow her here. But in truth, how could anyone gather information just after a day, and why would she even do that in the first place? And so, Riley said as he slowly approached her, what news do you have of her, Catherine? Maybe you would like some coffee first. Catherine, however, suddenly stood up from her seat, trying her best to avoid the topic. And perhaps due to the force of her standing up, or maybe even perhaps subconsciously deliberate, her robe loosened. She quickly covered herself up, but not before Riley was able to see her finely shaped breasts bouncing lovely. She so wanted to run away and scream in frustration, but no, the mission comes first. And so, the only thing she could do was slowly turn her eyes towards Riley to see his reaction. Did you see mine? I don't drink coffee, Catherine. But perhaps if you have milk. Was that some sort of joke since he saw her breasts, or did he really just want milk? But considering the deadpan way he just uttered that, it would seem that he didn't even care that he saw her breasts. Impossible. Even insects copulate. It's in the nature of every living being in the world. Riley should feel something. Did you see my breasts? Catherine could not help herself from asking, the tone of her voice unwavering. I did, Riley quickly answered. And it is irrelevant in our current situation. Catherine's eyes could not help but twitch upon hearing Riley's words. Irrelevant? Doesn't he know how many fan fictions she has in Bloot? There were hundreds, some even written in another language. She knows she should feel relieved that Darkday didn't have any sort of feelings for her, but seeing him without his mask and looking like a note-somnambule and slightly attractive person for some reason, there was this growing sense of wanting validation from him. She knows it's wrong, but she just couldn't help it. It was final. Riley did have enchanting powers. It might just be some sort of Stockholm syndrome, but she was betting on the former. Evil, truly evil. Don't you feel anything? But contrary to her feelings, she didn't back down. About your breasts? Yes, about my breasts. What else? Do you not feel anything while looking at me? Should I? Riley squinted his eyes as he looked at Catherine from head to toe. You are very beautiful, Catherine. What? Catherine could feel her legs turn weak from suddenly hearing Riley's words. I could say I feel lust. Riley then stood up from his seat, slowly approaching the slightly phased Catherine. What? Catherine could only repeat her words. What are you doing? What's happening? Why can't I move? I am not using my powers. Catherine, Riley said as he slowly lifted Catherine's robes, slightly exposing her breasts. Yes, it is lust I feel. Is that what you wanted to hear from me, Catherine T? That's not what I know. Riley then let out a sigh as he fixed Catherine's robes, tying it tight so it won't fall off again. My mother told me that lust is fleeting and that what women really want is love. But love, in my mother's knowledge, happens instantly, but could develop as long as it wants to take, and blossom eternally. And if that is what you wanted to hear, then I apologize. Riley then returned to his seat as he looked to the side. You and I both know that something is mentally wrong with me, Catherine. I do not think I am capable of feeling love. Any nervousness or silliness that circled around Catherine disappeared as she saw the look on Riley's face. He wasn't really expressing anything and still held the completely stoic look that seemed to be his default resting face. It might just be her imagination, but Riley felt lonely. It was almost as if he was fragile and could break at any moment. She thought that Riley was most human when he emits his Darkday aura, but seeing him like this now, she just could not help but hug him. What are you doing? What exactly was she doing? Is what she wanted to ask herself as her arms suddenly wrapped around Riley. The last time she touched him, she was almost choked to death. Realizing this, she quickly pulled herself away, putting up some sort of wind barrier between her and Riley. However, contrary to her expectations, Riley remained sitting. You are not going to kill me. Why would I do that? Because I touched you. You said it in the car yesterday, that no one is allowed to touch you. You are not just no one, Catherine. That's